In previous videos, I've already talked about the revival of some of Gerry Anderson's Super Marionation shows in the 1990s, and how alongside this revival there was a sudden burgeoning of new merchandising and toys to support these shows. The most popular of these shows I think undoubtedly would be Thunderbirds, and my personal favourite Thunderbird was always Thunderbird 2. And thankfully, toy company Matchbox was on hand to produce a line of 3-inch action figures and an in-scale Thunderbird 2 playset. So without further ado, join me as I flash back all the way to 1992 to look at the Thunderbirds 2 electronic playset. So starting with the packaging, the first thing to say is that this is quite big, quite large, quite a chunky box all in all, which is really fun and exciting. I always love the illustrated approach to packaging that we saw in the 80s and the 90s, and this is no exception. This is a wonderful image that we have on the front of the box here, demonstrating this action sequence where obviously the oil rig is on fire, Thunderbird 2 coming into the rescue, and of course even Thunderbird 4 is playing its part there. This looks absolutely fantastic. It's very consistent with the themes and the style of the show, and it's just very evocative. It's really nice that we have an image of one of the Thunderbird pilots there, and it's very bright and colourful and very presentable, and it still looks good on display after all these years. When we flip the packaging over to the back of the box, we can see they've opted for a huge giant photo image of the actual toy itself, which looks great. They've created a bit of a diorama to make it look like it's on Tracy Island, I think, or on some beach somewhere, and it looks absolutely great. They've done a really nice job of this. Again, it's vivid, it's bright, it's colourful, and they've taken care to highlight some of the key action features of this playset with an individual photograph of each feature. The model itself is in scale with the action figures that it supports, and so this is quite a sizable model, and it's all one piece. There's no assembly required, and it's very nicely produced here as well. The colourings look really accurate, and the sculpting looks pretty much spot on. Thanks to the 4 landing legs, it does have the option to stand freely, and it looks really nice when it does this. There's no issues with these legs, they're not wobbly, they're very secure, and it looks really proud when they are fully extended. There's not much in the way of paint application, but what is there is authentic to what we see in the show. We have the yellow stripes, we have the red, and of course we have the Thunderbird 2 decal stuck on in white in the appropriate places. We can also see that on the cockpit we have these windows, again faithful to what we see in the show. If I had a criticism, I might have actually opted to enlarge these or exaggerate these windows slightly just to be able to see through and see the pilot sitting inside. And dotted throughout the vehicle here and there are some choice stickers that have been used to recreate various engine parts that we see on the vehicle. Most noticeably we can see it on the exhaust here, and it looks absolutely fantastic. And as we've seen already, we have the option for Thunderbird 2 to stand on its telescopic legs and stand freely without incident, which is fantastic. Or, just as in the show, we can fold these up into the main body of the ship and it can fly away. And if we want to release them, there's a handy trigger button here to pop these legs back out. Now, fans of the show will know that the cargo hold, the central part, the body of this ship, actually detaches from the vehicle, and the same is true here. The central cargo hold simply slides away, and we can press this red release catch to open the door and reveal Thunderbird 4 inside. Now, Thunderbird 4, much like Thunderbird 2, is nicely to scale. It is accurately sculpted and nicely painted. We can see the decals on there, and it looks pretty faithful to what we see on screen. And it even has an action feature of its own. You'll notice there is this swivel point at the front there that allows this plough to lift up and down, and there is a red button on top that when pressed reveals a number of different instruments that Thunderbird 4 can use. Now, in truth, there's not an awful lot to this, and it kind of feels like it's missing something, because although it's quite cool that these kind of pop forwards, they only pop forward very fractionally, and then they slide back, and it feels like there should have been something more to just make this a little bit more exciting. But that said, I do really like that we have this, and they've made an attempt to do something with it. Now, once the cargo hold is released, we have the option to lift the cockpit and reveal the pilots within. And of course, this cockpit, these 2 seats here, will accommodate pretty much any figure that was released as part of this line. Now, undoubtedly, my favourite feature of this playset is the sound effects.
Thunderbird 2, ready for liftoff. SOB, standing by.
Now, before we wrap up for today, I did want to briefly just touch on some of the action figures that are available as part of this line. The packaging is pretty standard, as we can see here. Again, we have all the Thunderbirds on display. It is a single card with the bubble packaging there, and we can see the figure within that bubble packaging. Each figure is roughly 3 inches tall and usually comes with one accessory. On the reverse of the card, it's surprising just how text heavy this is. There's an awful lot of text here in small print, but that said, there is a nice colourful central image, which is clearly a promotion for the other products in this line. And as you can see, this is a pretty full, pretty well developed collection of toys that were produced by Matchbox. These figures are quite simple sculpts, and yet there's something quite fun and pleasing about all of them. Perhaps it's just their bright colours and their childlike simplicity, but there's something very collectible about this line of toys. I guess you could say they have a very strong toyetic quality. There's something fun and childlike about them. They're small, but are reasonably detailed, and virtually every major character is represented. The articulation scheme for these figures is very basic. There's essentially 5 points. There's one swivel at the head and the neck, there's one at each shoulder, and there is another one at the hip. So certainly by today's standards, the articulation is not earth-shattering, and yet it is enough for these very simple, very fun 3-inch action figures. And as with any action figure line, I feel like the action figures themselves really come to life when you start putting them next to or in playsets. And the Thunderbirds line is no exception. When you put these figures together with Thunderbirds 2, you have a really fun collection of toys for children to play with and for adult collectors to put on display. There's something very pleasing and displayable about this set of toys that even as an adult collector, they're still really fun to have out on display. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and remember to subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos soon.